Welcome to the story of the Harlem Kingpin. Who outsmarted the Mafia? Bumpy Johnson, a man whose intelligence was as sharp as his reputation was dangerous. From the streets of Harlem to negotiating face to face with the Italian Mafia, Bumpy didn't just survive the criminal underworld. He controlled it with strategy, patience, and respect. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe because every detail in this video comes from deep research, verified sources, and real historical records. Finding true data takes serious time and effort, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Bumpy Johnson was born Ellsworth Raymond Johnson in 1905 in Charleston, South Carolina. His story truly began when he was sent north to Harlem as a teenager. His parents made the difficult decision after his older brother was accused of killing a white man, a charge that highlighted the brutal racial realities of the Jim Crow South. Harlem, at the time, represented both safety and opportunity for young black men fleeing the violence and limitations of the South. When Bumpy arrived in Harlem, the neighborhood was in the middle of a transformation. The Harlem Renaissance was emerging, black culture was flourishing, and the streets were alive with ambition, creativity, and tension. However, alongside the art and music was poverty, discrimination, and limited legal opportunities. For many young men, survival required toughness, intelligence, and adaptability, qualities Bumpy quickly developed. From a young age, Bumpy stood out. He was physically intimidating, quick-tempered, and fearless. What truly set him apart was his sharp mind. Unlike many street figures of the time, Bumpy loved reading and learning. He studied history, philosophy, and poetry, often quoting Shakespeare and other classic writers, an unusual trait that earned him both curiosity and respect on the streets. Harlem's underground economy played a major role in shaping Bumpy's early life. The numbers racket, gambling operations, and protection schemes were often the only paths to financial independence for black residents locked out of legitimate business. Bumpy observed these systems closely, learning how money, power, and loyalty really worked in the neighborhood. His reputation grew quickly as someone who could handle himself in violent situations, but also think several steps ahead. Street fights, confrontations, and small criminal jobs became part of his daily reality, yet Bumpy never acted without purpose. Even in his youth, he showed signs of strategic thinking rather than reckless behavior. During this period, Bumpy caught the attention of influential figures in Harlem's underworld, especially strong black leaders who resisted outside control. His confidence, discipline, and refusal to bow to intimidation made him a natural fit for higher-level operations. Harlem wasn't just raising a tough kid, it was shaping a future power player. By the time Bumpy Johnson reached adulthood, Harlem had fully molded him. The environment taught him how to survive, how to command respect, and how to blend intellect with street authority. These early years laid the foundation for the man who would later stand toe-to-toe with the Mafia and refuse to be pushed aside in his own neighborhood. Ellsworth Johnson earned the nickname Bumpy long before his name became legendary in Harlem. The name came from a noticeable physical feature, a pronounced bump on the back of his head that he had from birth. While the nickname may have started as a casual or even teasing label, it eventually became a name that carried fear, respect, and authority throughout the streets of New York. In Harlem, nicknames were more than just street slang, they were identities. A nickname could define your reputation, your strength, and how others perceived you. For Johnson, Bumpy quickly replaced his given name, signaling his transformation from an ordinary young man into someone known and recognized in the neighborhood's underground world. At first, Bumpy was associated with his temper. He was known for being quick to react, especially when disrespected. In an environment where weakness invited danger, his readiness to defend himself helped him establish an early reputation as someone not to be tested. The name began to carry meaning beyond physical appearance. It became a warning. However, as his influence grew, the nickname took on a deeper significance. Bumpy became synonymous with intelligence and unpredictability. People learned that he wasn't just a street fighter, he was a thinker. Those who underestimated him based on his rough exterior often found themselves outmaneuvered. The nickname also helped build mystique. In the criminal underworld, names mattered, and Bumpy was memorable. It spread easily through word of mouth, whispered in gambling houses, bars, and street corners. Long before newspapers paid attention to him, the name alone commanded attention. For law enforcement, Bumpy Johnson became a name that appeared again and again in reports and investigations. The nickname made him easier to track, but it also turned him into a symbol, one man representing Harlem's resistance to outside control. His name became larger than the individual behind it. Within the black community, the name Bumpy carried a different weight. To many, it represented defiance, pride, and a refusal to submit to systems that excluded them. He wasn't just a criminal figure. He was seen as someone who stood his ground in a world designed to push him aside. Over time, the nickname Bumpy became legendary. What began as a simple reference to a physical trait evolved into a powerful identity, one that embodied strength, intellect, and control. The name would live on long after his death, permanently etched into Harlem's history and American crime folklore. Bumpy Johnson's rise in Harlem's underworld took a decisive turn when he came under the influence of Madame Stephanie St. Clair, one of the most powerful and intelligent figures in the neighborhood. Known as the Numbers Queen, St. Clair was a fierce, outspoken leader who ran Harlem's lucrative numbers racket during a time when black-run operations were under constant threat from white and Italian gangs. Madame St. Clair immediately recognized something different in Bumpy. Unlike many young men drawn to street life, he possessed discipline, intelligence, and an unusual hunger to learn. She saw not just a bodyguard or enforcer, but a strategist, someone who could think long-term and protect Harlem's interests rather than act purely on impulse. Under her mentorship, Bumpy learned that power wasn't just about violence, it was about organization, loyalty, and control of money. St. Clair taught him how the numbers racket worked from top to bottom, including collections, payouts, protection, and community relations. This education gave Bumpy a business-minded approach to crime that separated him from typical street figures. St. Clair also instilled in Bumpy a strong sense of racial pride and resistance. She openly challenged police corruption and mafia intimidation, even writing letters to politicians and speaking to the press. From her, Bumpy learned that fearlessness wasn't reckless, it was calculated. Standing up publicly could be just as powerful as violence in maintaining control. During this time, Bumpy became her chief enforcer and trusted lieutenant. He handled disputes, protected territory, and ensured loyalty within the organization. His presence alone often ended conflicts before they escalated, reinforcing his growing reputation as someone who could not be easily intimidated or replaced. The relationship between Bumpy and Sate Claire was built on mutual respect. She valued his loyalty and intellect, while he respected her vision and leadership. This partnership allowed Harlem's Black run operations to survive longer than many others during a period when the mafia was aggressively expanding. By the time Madame St. Clair stepped back from active leadership, Bumpy Johnson was fully prepared to step forward. Her mentorship had shaped his mindset, sharpened his strategy, and solidified his role as Harlem's protector. Without her influence, Bumpy's story and Harlem's criminal history would have unfolded very differently. The Harlem Numbers Racket was the backbone of the neighborhood's underground economy, and it played a central role in Bumpy Johnson's rise to power. The game itself was simple. People bet small amounts of money on number combinations, but the operation behind it was complex, highly organized, and extremely profitable. For many Harlem residents shut out of banks and legitimate businesses, the numbers racket was both entertainment and hope. Under Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the numbers operation was more than a criminal enterprise. It was a community institution. Money from the racket often circulated back into Harlem, supporting local businesses and families. When Bumpy Johnson became deeply involved, he learned that controlling the numbers meant controlling influence, loyalty, and financial power across the neighborhood. Bumpy quickly proved he understood the system better than most. He wasn't just collecting money or enforcing rules. He studied the flow of cash, the behavior of bettors, and the weaknesses of competitors. This allowed him to spot fraud, prevent internal theft, and maintain discipline within the operation. His ability to combine street authority with business sense made him invaluable. As the numbers racket grew more profitable, it attracted unwanted attention, especially from white and Italian gangs looking to take control. These outside groups used violence, intimidation, and police connections to push black operators out. Bumpy became the front line defense against these takeover attempts, using both force and strategy to protect Harlem's interests. Unlike many enforcers, Bumpy knew when violence would help and when it would cause damage. He often used reputation alone to settle disputes, understanding that stability was crucial for keeping the numbers racket running smoothly. Chaos meant lost money, broken trust, and increased police attention. Law enforcement constantly targeted the numbers racket, but shutting it down proved difficult. The game was deeply woven into daily life, and Bumpy helped design systems that allowed operations to continue even during raids and arrests. His adaptability kept the business alive despite relentless pressure. By mastering the Harlem numbers racket, Bumpy Johnson secured both wealth and authority. More importantly, He positioned himself as the man who could protect Harlem's economy when no one else would. This control laid the foundation for his later confrontations with the mafia and ultimately for the deal that would change Harlem forever. The conflict between Bumpy Johnson and Dutch Schultz marked one of the most dangerous periods in Harlem's criminal history. Dutch Schultz, a ruthless Jewish American gangster, set his sights on Harlem's numbers racket in the early 1930s after seeing how profitable it was. Unlike local operators, Schultz had money, weapons, and corrupt law enforcement on his side, making him a serious threat to black, controlled businesses in the neighborhood. Schultz didn't negotiate, he invaded. He used extreme violence to force black numbers runners out, ordering beatings, kidnappings, and murders to spread fear. His message was clear: either work for him or disappear. Harlem's streets quickly became tense, and many small operators folded under the pressure, unable to match Schultz's brutality. Bumpy Johnson emerged as one of the few who openly resisted. Backed by Madame Stephanie St. Clair, Bumpy became the symbol of Harlem's refusal to surrender. He confronted Schultz's men directly, surviving multiple assassination attempts and continuing to operate despite constant danger. His calm under pressure and refusal to back down earned him legendary status in the neighborhood. What made the conflict unique was Bumpy's understanding that brute force alone wouldn't defeat Schultz. Schultz had deeper pockets and political protection. Bumpy began thinking beyond street-level retaliation, looking for ways to change the balance of power rather than escalate an unwinnable war. The violence reached such extreme levels that it began attracting national attention and increased law enforcement scrutiny. Schultz's unpredictable behavior and excessive bloodshed started to concern even other major crime bosses. His aggression was bad for business, creating instability that threatened everyone's profits, including the Italian mafia. Behind the scenes, Bumpy and St. Clair worked to expose Schultz's actions and increase pressure on him from multiple directions. This combination of resistance, survival, and strategic patience allowed Bumpy to outlast a man who seemed unstoppable. Harlem did not collapse under Schultz's assault, largely because of Bumpy's leadership. The conflict ultimately ended not with a street battle, but with Dutch Schultz's assassination, ordered by the Italian mafia, not Bumpy himself. Schultz had become too dangerous to control. His death removed the biggest threat Harlem had faced, and it opened the door for Bumpy Johnson to negotiate from a position of strength, setting the stage for his historic deal with the mafia. After the fall of Dutch Schultz, Harlem's numbers racket became an open prize, and the Italian mafia quickly moved to claim it. To them, Harlem was unfinished business, rich, organized, and vulnerable without Schultz's direct control. Several mafia families believed it would be easy to push out black operators and absorb the territory into their expanding criminal empire. The mafia's approach was more calculated than Schultz's. Instead of immediate chaos, they relied on intimidation, political connections, quiet pressure. They attempted to buy out operators, threaten key figures, and use law enforcement to disrupt black-run businesses. The goal was control without drawing excessive attention. Bumpy Johnson stood directly in their way. By this time, he was no longer just an enforcer. He was the most powerful figure in Harlem's underground economy. The mafia underestimated him, assuming he could be removed through fear or force like others before him. That assumption would prove costly. Attempts were made to isolate Bumpy by targeting his associates and disrupting cash flow. However, his influence ran deep. He had loyalty from numbers runners, protection from the community, and a reputation that made people think twice before acting against him. Every move against him was met with resistance or failure. What made the takeover attempt especially difficult was Bumpy's discipline. He refused to overreact. While the mafia expected emotional retaliation, Bumpy stayed patient, knowing that uncontrolled violence would only justify a full-scale crackdown. His restraint confused and frustrated his enemies. The mafia also faced a unique problem. Harlem wasn't like other territories. The numbers racket was deeply tied to the local black community, and removing Bumpy risked destabilizing profits altogether. Chaos would hurt everyone involved, including the mafia themselves. As the takeover stalled, mafia leaders began to reconsider their strategy. They realized that eliminating Bumpy Johnson might cost more than working with him. This failed takeover attempt set the stage for an unprecedented outcome, negotiation instead of domination, leading to one of the most surprising alliances in American crime history. Bumpy Johnson's confrontation with the Italian mafia reached a turning point when he negotiated directly with Charles Lucky Luciano, one of the most powerful crime bosses in America. Luciano was a strategic mastermind who had recently reorganized organized crime across the country, creating a network that maximized profits and minimized unnecessary conflict. Unlike earlier aggressors, he recognized that Harlem's numbers racket couldn't be taken by brute force without risking both financial and reputational losses. The negotiations between Bumpy and Luciano were unconventional for the criminal world. Instead of guns and intimidation, the discussions relied on respect, intelligence, and a recognition of Bumpy's influence. Luciano understood that Bumpy controlled Harlem streets, numbers operations, and, most importantly, the loyalty of the community. Any attempt to bypass him would lead to chaos, loss of income, and public attention that could draw law enforcement. Bumpy approached the negotiations with his usual combination of caution and strategy. He didn't make empty threats, but also didn't concede authority. The deal he sought was clear. The mafia could operate in Harlem in a limited capacity, but Bumpy retained control over the neighborhood and its profits. This balance ensured Harlem's black operators remained in charge while still allowing Luciano to profit without conflict. The agreement was as much about survival as it was about profit. Bumpy had witnessed what uncontrolled mafia aggression could do. Dutch Schultz's takeover attempt was a clear example. By negotiating a deal, he avoided unnecessary bloodshed, maintained community loyalty, and secured his position as the undisputed kingpin of Harlem. The deal also highlighted Bumpy's intelligence in reading his enemies. Luciano respected pragmatism and results more than brute force by demonstrating that cooperation was more profitable than confrontation. Bumpy established himself as a negotiator on equal footing with one of America's most feared gangsters. This elevated him from a local enforcer to a national figure in organized crime. Bumpy's influence over the terms of the deal allowed him to maintain Harlem's autonomy. Unlike other neighborhoods, where the mafia exerted total control, Harlem's black operators could continue running numbers, enforcing local rules, and distributing wealth without interference. This not only solidified Bumpy's authority, but also preserved economic opportunities for the community. The deal with Luciano became a defining moment in Bumpy Johnson's life and legacy. It demonstrated that intelligence, negotiation, and respect could achieve what violence alone could not. By outsmarting one of the most powerful gangsters in the country, Bumpy not only secured Harlem's independence, but also cemented his reputation as a strategist and protector of his community, a reputation that would last long after his death. After securing a deal with Lucky Luciano, Bumpy Johnson faced the ongoing challenge of maintaining Harlem's independence from other Italian mafia families who sought to test the limits of his control. These families saw Harlem as a lucrative opportunity, and some believed that Bumpy's negotiation with Luciano might signal weakness or an opening to expand their influence. Bumpy quickly realized that surviving in this environment required more than brute force. It demanded strategy, foresight, and an unparalleled understanding of human behavior. Bumpy leveraged both his reputation and his intelligence to outmaneuver mafia attempts at intimidation. His approach combined psychological insight with calculated action. He knew that fear alone was not enough. Respect and recognition of his authority were equally important. By demonstrating that any aggression against Harlem would be costly and risky, he made the cost of encroachment higher than any potential gain. He also cultivated relationships with key mafia operatives who valued profit over conflict. Bumpy was careful to show that cooperation with him was more beneficial than confrontation. He allowed limited business interactions in Harlem under his terms, creating a controlled environment that satisfied both parties. This balance allowed him to maintain ultimate control without sparking violent turf wars. In addition to negotiations, Bumpy used intelligence, gathering to anticipate threats. He had eyes and ears across Harlem, from loyal associates in the numbers racket to trusted community members who reported suspicious activity. By staying informed, he could predict moves from rival mafia families and counter them before they escalated. This proactive approach was a key factor in his long-term survival. Bumpy's ability to outsmart the Italian crime families extended to law enforcement as well. Many mafia attempts relied on corrupt officials to apply pressure or make arrests, but Bumpy maintained connections and influence that allowed him to navigate these dangers. He understood the system and exploited weaknesses, turning potential liabilities into strategic advantages. Violence was used sparingly and selectively, not recklessly. Bumpy understood that unnecessary bloodshed could destabilize Harlem and attract unwanted attention from both the press and authorities. By combining restraint with calculated strikes when necessary, he solidified his reputation as a man who could enforce authority without endangering his own operations. Ultimately, Bumpy Johnson's strategy in dealing with the Italian mafia was a masterclass in negotiation, intelligence, and psychological warfare. He preserved Harlem's autonomy, maintained control over the numbers racket, and earned the respect, even fear, of powerful criminal organizations. His ability to outthink and outmaneuver some of the most dangerous figures in organized crime ensured that Harlem remained under his rule for decades. Even a man as powerful as Bumpy Johnson was not immune to the law. Throughout his life, he faced multiple arrests, but one of the most significant periods was his time in prison, which became more than just a setback. It became another arena for demonstrating influence and control. Unlike many criminals who lose power behind bars, Bumpy found ways to maintain authority and even expand his reach while incarcerated. Bumpy's time in prison taught him patience and strategy on a new level. He understood that survival in prison required both respect and careful alliances. His reputation from Harlem preceded him. He quickly established himself as someone not to be challenged. Fellow inmates and even guards recognized his intelligence and authority, giving him leverage in negotiations and conflicts within the prison system. Inside, Bumpy didn't isolate himself. He built relationships with key inmates and maintained communication with associates outside. These connections allowed him to continue overseeing aspects of Harlem's operations from behind bars. Bumpy's ability to manage business while incarcerated demonstrated that his influence was not solely tied to his physical presence on the streets. Prison also gave him the opportunity to study human behavior in a controlled environment. Observing rival criminals, understanding their motivations, and learning their weaknesses became part of his personal education. This sharpened his strategic mind, preparing him for future conflicts with both local operators and mafia figures after his release. Unlike many criminals, Bumpy used his incarceration to strengthen his image. He handled disputes calmly, avoided unnecessary violence, and gained the loyalty of fellow inmates. Stories of his fairness, intelligence, and uncompromising authority spread, enhancing his mystique and reputation outside the prison walls. Harlem residents continued to respect him, knowing that even imprisonment could not diminish his power. Bumpy's influence behind bars also allowed him to protect his allies. He could prevent internal betrayal, manage disputes, and ensure that the numbers racket and other operations continued smoothly. This ability to maintain order from a distance reinforced his status as a leader who could command respect regardless of circumstance. By the time Bumpy Johnson was released, he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more strategic. His prison experience demonstrated that real power is not just about territory or violence. It's about influence, intelligence, and the ability to command loyalty in any environment. This period solidified his legend as a man who could control Harlem even when physically confined, making him an unparalleled figure in organized crime history. Bumpy Johnson was more than just a feared gangster. He was a protector of Harlem, and this dual reputation earned him significant respect within the community. Unlike many criminals whose actions alienate local residents, Bumpy understood the importance of giving back and maintaining loyalty. He used his influence not just for personal gain, but to safeguard the people and businesses that made Harlem thrive. From early in his career, Bumpy enforced a strict code of conduct on the streets. He made it clear that while he controlled the numbers racket and other operations, he would not allow exploitation of Harlem's residents. Predatory figures from outside the neighborhood whether rival gangs or corrupt officials, quickly learned that crossing him meant facing swift retribution. This made him a guardian in the eyes of the community. Bumpy also intervened directly in disputes among Harlem residents. Whether it was a neighborhood feud, a business conflict, or a dispute within the criminal underworld, he often mediated solutions that minimized violence. These actions earned him respect not just as a powerful figure, but as someone who upheld a sense of order and justice, an uncommon trait in the criminal world. Financially, Bumpy was known to support local businesses and families. His operations provided jobs and income for many residents who might otherwise have had few options. By keeping money circulating within Harlem, he strengthened the local economy and created a network of loyalty that reinforced his control. People saw him as someone who could protect and improve their community while also maintaining his power. Bumpy's visibility in the neighborhood also contributed to his standing. He was often present on the streets, attending social events, speaking with local leaders, and addressing grievances personally. This direct involvement made him accessible and humanized him in the eyes of the public, distinguishing him from distant or purely violent crime bosses. His reputation extended beyond fear. It was built on respect and reciprocity. Residents knew that if Bumpy promised protection or support, he would deliver. This sense of reliability created an unspoken alliance between him and the community where loyalty and trust were mutually reinforced. It also made it difficult for outside forces to gain a foothold in Harlem without negotiating with him directly. Ultimately, Bumpy Johnson's commitment to community respect and protection became a defining aspect of his legacy. He wasn't just a criminal mastermind. He was a protector, a strategist, and a figure who balanced authority with accountability. This combination ensured that his influence endured long after his death, cementing his status as one of Harlem's most legendary figures. Bumpy Johnson's influence extended beyond the criminal underworld and into the political and social currents of Harlem, most notably through his relationship with Malcolm X. Though they came from very different worlds, Bumpy from the streets of organized crime and Malcolm from the rising civil rights movement, paths intersected in a shared commitment to the protection and empowerment of the Black community. Malcolm X, in his early years as a minister for the Nation of Islam, recognized the influence of figures like Bumpy. While the streets and the pulpit operated in different spheres, both men understood that Harlem's survival and growth required strong leadership and a sense of respect for the community. Bumpy's local authority complemented Malcolm's emerging ideological influence, creating an informal but significant alignment. Bumpy acted as a kind of protector for Malcolm in certain situations. The streets of Harlem were dangerous, and Malcolm often spoke out against both external and internal threats to the Black community. Bumpy's presence and reputation provided a form of security, allowing Malcolm to operate with a degree of safety while challenging systemic oppression and criminal encroachment. Their relationship also highlighted Bumpy's nuanced understanding of power. He was more than a gangster. He was a strategic thinker who recognized that alliances outside the criminal world could strengthen his position. Supporting Malcolm, even indirectly, elevated Bumpy's standing as a leader who could influence both street, level, and community-wide matters, bridging the gap between crime and social activism. At the same time, Bumpy maintained boundaries. He did not fully align with Malcolm's political mission, nor did he publicly engage in activism. His role was largely one of behind the scenes influence, offering protection, advice, or intervention when conflicts threatened the community. This allowed him to maintain his authority without undermining Malcolm's work or drawing unwanted law enforcement attention. The relationship also illustrated a shared philosophy: loyalty, respect, and self-determination. Both men believed in the importance of Harlem controlling its own affairs, whether through business, community protection, or activism. While their methods differed, Bumpy using street strategy and Malcolm using ideology, their goals often overlapped, and each recognized the value of the other's influence. Ultimately, Bumpy Johnson's connection with Malcolm X reinforced his reputation as a man who cared about Harlem beyond personal profit, showed that his influence extended into the moral and social fabric of the community, not just the criminal underworld. By aligning, even indirectly, with leaders like Malcolm, Bumpy cemented his legacy as a protector and strategist whose vision for Harlem included both power and responsibility. Bumpy Johnson's life and actions left an indelible mark on Harlem, shaping not only its criminal landscape, but also its social and cultural identity. By the time of his death in 1968, he had become a symbol of Harlem's resilience, a man who combined intelligence, strategic thinking, and street authority to protect his neighborhood from outside control. His legacy went far beyond fear. It was built on respect, loyalty, and community influence. One of the most significant aspects of Bumpy's legacy was his ability to maintain Harlem's autonomy. Unlike many other black neighborhoods, which fell under the direct control of the Italian mafia, Harlem remained largely self-governed under his watch. This achievement required skillful negotiation, strategic patience, and a reputation that commanded respect from both allies and enemies. He proved that power could be exercised without total reliance on violence. Bumpy's approach to crime was unique in that it blended business acumen with social responsibility. He understood that stability was essential for profitability and survival. By maintaining order, protecting residents, and supporting local operations, he ensured that the neighborhood thrived economically and socially, even amid the challenges of systemic racism and police corruption. His influence extended to culture as well. Stories of Bumpy Johnson became part of Harlem's folklore, inspiring books, films, and television shows. He represented a complex figure, gangster who was also a protector, a man who operated outside the law, yet earned the community's trust and admiration. This duality made him a legendary character in American history. Bumpy also left a blueprint for leadership that went beyond brute force. He demonstrated the power of intelligence, strategic negotiation, and alliances, both within the criminal underworld and in the wider community. His ability to outsmart rivals, including powerful mafia figures, showed that brains could triumph over brawn, even in the most dangerous circumstances. Even decades after his death, Bumpy Johnson's name carries weight in Harlem and beyond. Residents remember him as a symbol of defiance, resilience, and authority. He is often referenced as an example of someone who stood his ground, protected his people, and navigated a hostile world with skill and precision. Ultimately, Bumpy Johnson's legacy is a testament to the complex nature of power. He was not just a criminal, he was a strategist, a community protector, and a Harlem icon. His life story continues to captivate historians, writers, and filmmakers because it embodies the intersection of intellect, street wisdom, and unwavering loyalty, qualities that ensured his place as Harlem's legendary kingpin.